Yeah, we Riddle G here, and today we're playing some old arcade games. I thought I would switch it up because normally I would just play a retro game and I would just play along with it. I'm going to actually tell you about the games from now on. Some interesting facts, something you might not have known. First game up, Asteroids. Asteroids is a space-themed game designed by Lyle Ryans, Ed Lugg and Dominic Walsh. It was released in 1979 by Atari. The player controls a single spaceship in an asteroid field which is periodically traversed by flying saucers. The object of the game is to shoot and destroy asteroids and saucers while not colliding with either. The game becomes harder as the number of asteroids increases. One of the first major hits of the golden age of arcade gaming, it sold over 70,000 arcade cabinets. That's 70,000! That's crazy. In the 1980s, it was ported to Atari's home system, and the Atari VCS version sold over 3 million copies. The game was widely imitated, and it directly influenced games such as The Defender, Gravatar, and many other video games. Asteroid was conceived during the meeting between Lugg and Ryans, who decided to use hardware developed by Howard D. Lamb, previously used in the Lunar Lander game. Asteroids was based on an unfinished game titled Cosmos. It's a physical model controller scheme. The gameplay elements were delivered from Space War, Computer Space, and Space Invaders, and it was refined through trial and error. The game is rendered on a vector display in a two-dimensional view that warps around both screens' axes. In the original game design, saucers were supposed to begin shooting as soon as they appeared, but this was changed. Additionally, saucers can only aim at the player's ship on screen. They are not capable of aiming across the screen boundaries. These behaviours allowed the lurking strategy, in which players stay near the edge of the screen opposite the saucer by keeping just one or two rocks in play. A player can shoot across the boundary and destroy saucers to accumulate points indefinitely with little risk of being destroyed. Arcade operators began to complain about losing revenue due to this exploit. In response, Atari issued a patch. Due to the impact and exploit, Atari and other companies changed their development and testing policies to try and prevent future games from having such exploits. Some of Asteroids' sequels, Asteroids Deluxe, which was made in 1981, Space Duel in 1982, and Blastoids in 1987. In 1998, Surox developed an enhanced version of Asteroids which is released by Activision on multiple platforms. This includes a version of PlayStation released on October 31st, 1998. Nintendo 64, December the 14th, 1999. Microsoft Windows, November the 30th, 1998. Game Boy Color, September 1999. And Macintosh, released in July 2000. On February the 6th, 1982, Leo Daniels of Carolina Beach, North Carolina, set a world record score. On November the 13th of the same year, a 15-year-old Scott Safran of Cherry Hill, New Jersey, set a new record in 1998. To congratulate Safran on his accomplishment, Twin Galaxies searched for him for 4 years until 2002, when it was discovered that he had died in an accident in 1989. In a ceremony in Philadelphia on April 27th, 2002, Walt Adair presented an award to the surviving members of Safran's family, commemorating his achievement. On April 5th, 2010, John McAllister broke Safran's record in a 58-hour internet live stream. Some claim that the true world record for Asteroids was set in a laundromat in Hyde Park, New York from June 30th to July the 3rd, 1982, and that the details of the score are over 8 million were published in July the 4th edition of Pornkipski's journal. Second up on today's video, Battlezone. Battlezone is an arcade game created by Ed Rothbard and published by Atari. It was released on June the 1st, 1980. The game is a first-person perspective vehicular combat simulator in which the player destroys enemy tanks and other targets for points. The game uses vector graphics again to produce 3D wireframes of the enemy tanks, UFOs and terrain. Some cabinets included an overlay to the screen to make the lower part of the screen appear green, which was the gameplay area, and the top part of the screen red, radar information. Battlezone may be one of the first games where objects appeared to hit the player's screen when the player had been hit or /killed. The player controlled the tank from first person view and had to use 2 joysticks. Battlezone was developed using vector graphics similar to Asteroids. The designers of the game are Ed Rothbard, he was the main designer, Owen Rubin, who designed the exploding volcano, and Roger Hector, who helped in designing the tank and the enemy graphics. One of the two versions of the camera had viewing goggles, and along with the 3D graphics, this game was considered the very first virtual reality game. Another version of the game called Bradley Trainer was produced as a training simulator for the US Army. There was a persistent myth you could drive to the mountain in the background, drive up into the crater and discover a castle inside. This was false, but plans to include such a feature in future versions were inspired by this myth. A similar rumour insisted if one kept driving in the same direction for at least an hour without dying, one would eventually reach the mountains and see a tank factory pumping out enemy tanks. Others involved the UFO, including one which a mothership would attack after a set number of UFOs were destroyed. Throughout the 1980s, Battlezone was ported to several personal computers and video game consoles, including DOS, Apple II, Atari ST, Commodore 64, Sinclair, ZX Spectrum, and the Atari XEGS. Activision, the video game publishing giant, released a game for Microsoft Windows inspired and named Battlezone in 1998. Aside from the name, however, the game bear little resemblance to the original arcade game. On August the 30th, 1985, David Palmer of Citrus Heights, California, scored a world record while playing at the Game Room Arcade during Twin Galaxies 1985 video game Master Tournament. Palmer also holds the world record on numerous other arcade games, amongst them Firefox, Red Baron, Star Rider, Star Wars, Sub-Rock 3D, and The Empire Strikes Back, and finally TX1. And finally, the last game of the day, Centipede. Atari first released Centipede all the way back in 1980, and it gave players the chance to obliterate giant insects while taking care of other bugs. It's colourful, addictive, and pretty fun way to pass the time. When you ever think about arcade games, this one's legendary. However, there are some secrets about this title that you have yet to discover. There's also a sequel, Millipede, which was released in 1982. A lot of people don't realise, in Centipede, you're a garden gnome fighting off bugs and insects. In Millipede, you were an elf who was tasked with protecting your mushroom forest. During the 80s, it felt like everything was getting the Dungeons and Dragons board game treatment. Centipede was no different with the situation. Back in the early 80s, Atari created a board game that allowed players to take on the role of the gnome as well as the centipede itself. In 2011, Atari SE released a top-down 3D version of Centipede in a style of a run-and-gun adventure game for Nintendo 3DS and Wii. Centipede was one of the first major games to find an audience with female gamers. Isn't much of a surprise when you know who was involved. Donna Bailey, the only female employee at Atari Arcade, helped create the original game. Her involvement and work resonated with female gamers and helped propel Centipede's popularity. There's also way too many clones of the game to name any. This arcade game is old and required a different kind of skill. Not only did it require a sharp eye and agility, but also strategy. For tournament player, as of April 14th, 2018, Donald Hayes holds the world points record marathon player. And last but not least, did you know Centipede was a movie? In 2016, Emmett Fuller Oasis Films worked out a deal with Atari to bring Centipede to the silver screens. And I hope you liked the video. Like I say, it's going to be more like this. I'll hopefully get more eased with talking like this because it's reading from a script basically. But like and subscribe. And remember, eat that cake. Bye!